MVP week kicking off with all things discussed about Breanna Stewart. The great Jackie Powell is here. Locked on Women's Basketball starts now.
Ogunbowale for the win. Good!
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Well, hi there, everyone, and happy Tuesday to you. I hope you had a wonderful Labor Day. My name is Howard Megdal, and this is Locked On Women's Basketball. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every day. You guys keep showing up for us, over 100,000 listeners in August alone. Once again, we're here 6 days a week for you. You guys keep coming back for us. And of course, it is not just me, but the entire incredible staff over at The Next. Go to thenexthoops.com. It's $9 a month, $72 a year to subscribe. You get over 100 reported pieces on women's basketball every month direct to your inbox. It is the 24/7, 365 women's basketball newsroom we've always dreamed about, and now it is here. And so this week on the show, we're going to go with a theme, and it's MVP week. There are, just to set the scene for everybody, three, to my mind, absolutely stellar candidates for MVP of the WNBA. I think it's important to note that, in my opinion, we should have fun with it. We should have a conversation about it. I think it's worth avoiding anger as we go into it. I don't really understand why there's anger about it, but that's neither here nor there. I think the point is, this is what makes sports fun. There are three worthwhile candidates. It is a subjective award at the end of the day, but there are really good cases and really good reasons to think that Breanna Stewart, A'ja Wilson, Alyssa Thomas should all be the most valuable player of the league. So today we have Jackie Powell, the great beat reporter for the New York Liberty, to talk about Breanna Stewart's case. We are not here to advocate for anyone. We're here to break these down for you and let you guys decide. Tomorrow, we will have Jacqueline LeBlanc talking about Alyssa Thomas. Excuse me. And on Thursday, Matthew Walter talking about A'ja Wilson. Again, we have beat reporters at The Next in every market here to talk about it. Excuse me. So without further ado, I want to introduce Jackie Powell, who you all know very well. Jackie, what's the top line for the MVP case for Breanna Stewart?
The top line. I mean, I think if you look at the numbers, and it's really funny because just as we're having this conversation, the New York Liberty tweeted something very interesting. And of course, it's biased, but I think it's worth sharing with you all. They wrote, Stewie's historic season continues, joining Cheryl Swoops and Sylvia Fowles as the only players in WNBA history to lead in all win share categories in a single season. P.S. Swoops and Fowles did it in MVP seasons. So
it's true. Listen, by the numbers, it is real easy to make the Breanna Stewart case. Friend of the show, M. Adler, big fan of win shares, and so am I. And if you go by win shares, Breanna Stewart, 9.9 of them. That leads the league. That is ahead of A'ja Wilson at 9.5. And that is despite the fact that Stewie has played 37 games. A'ja has played 38 games. But you can go positive residual. You can go just about any different way of measuring. And Breanna Stewart has done it. And here in segment one, we're going to talk mostly about the numbers. Segment two, Jackie, you have a lot of terrific reporting for an upcoming piece, because we are also going to break this down on MVP week over at The Next. thenexthoops.com. We're going to have all three cases broken down by the beat reporters, people who have covered these players all season and know them best. And so from that perspective, and it goes back to the way I remember having these conversations both internally and externally with the New York Liberty people, who basically said, these players are willing to sacrifice their numbers in order to win a championship. And I get that, and it makes sense. And we've seen players do that in the past. Stewie didn't really do that, though, here. You compared her numbers, right, to some of her MVP seasons of the past.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty staggering. I have her hoop stats up right now, and I'm looking at her 2018 season.
Mm-hmm.
And so, okay, she's playing more minutes. She's scoring more. What else here? She is rebounding the ball better.
Mm-hmm.
She has higher assists. She almost has 4 assists per game this season, so 3.9 in
Her turnover percentage, by the way, is lower than
Yes.
it's been in any year other than last season. She's taking care of the basketball. For those who may not know, one of the things that really stands out statistically from Elena Deladon's games during her best years is she's got this turnover percentage around 6.5, which is just a crazy low number. Nobody's come close to it. Stewie has been, right around the low double digits for most of her career, but she was 6'4" last year, and she's at 7.1% this year. Again, playing with new teammates across the board. It's just an incredible thing how effectively she's been able to take care of the basketball.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm looking at turnover, the averages here. So 1.5, and her MVP season it was 1.8. Obviously, the whole steals and blocks thing, that doesn't sum up defense completely, but the numbers are higher here in 2023 compared to what they were in 2018.
Right.
I also happen to think that it is interesting to think about what her numbers were in 2018 alongside the fact about where the league was in 2018. And so I even looked at the MVP, the voting from 2018. And she very much so, I don't know if I want to say swept it, but it was not very close. And so the case the point here is it is so hard in 2023, this year in particular, to win MVP because of the high level talent in Asia Wilson and Alyssa Thomas that are also performing at this very high level. The only thing here, when you do the stat comparison, that is a tad bit lower is the field goal percentage. So it is 46.5, which is a little, in 2018, it was 52.9, which was absolutely unbelievable.
Yes.
But I think that comes with the caveat of her field goal attempts. So she's almost taking 17 shots per game. And that is much higher than a flat 15 in 2018. But Howard, I think I do want to go back to what you were saying about the idea of sacrifice and the near.
I want to talk about that in a second, but I do want to just jump in about the 2018. I can give you a little bit of insight on that. I actually was a voter in 2018.
Yes, you were.
It took me about 5 seconds to decide who I was going to vote for MVP in 2018. It was a real easy one. I went back to look ahead of time. And Liz Cambage had a great year in Dallas. Elena Deladon had a great year in her first year in Washington. But this one was an easy one. I would love to have as easy a time of it this time around. Frankly, it was identically easy to pick my rookie of the year as it will be in 2023. And for similar reasons, due to bids out of South Carolina, I got an email from Indiana Fever PR with the Aaliyah Boston case. And I was just like, you guys are good. You don't have to send out these emails. It's going to be Ilya Boston. But I do. Let's get into some of the sacrifice and some of the reporting that goes along with it a little more here in segment 2. But first, I want to talk to you guys at home about bird dogs. And, it's interesting. Bird dogs, they have these shorts, and you're sitting there and you say, all right, are they a bathing suit? Can I wear them out to the golf course when I go golfing with Rachel, with my wife? The answer is yes. The answer is, can I take them out to a casual summer dinner? Yeah, I can do all of those things too. And the thing about it is that they fit way better than a lot of the shorts that you'd use as individual options. They're not made of that stiff, restricting cotton. They invented this thing called cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki. I mean, it stretches so you get a way slimmer fit. You don't have to sacrifice movement. They have this wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long, which those of us in the Northeast, thank goodness, with the week that we're about to have. Again, you can go out for the evening, you can go to the pool in them, you can work out. It doesn't matter. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA or enter promo code LockedOnNBA at checkout for a free Bird Dogs water bottle with your order. Jackie, you know very well, we must stay hydrated in weeks like this. So important. Again, birddogs.com/LOCKEDONNBA for a free water bottle at checkout. You will not want to take your bird dogs off, I promise. So speaking of fit, when we think about how Breanna Stewart has managed to fit in with a team that, again, has so many new pieces, especially at the top of the pecking order. I know you were talking about before we went to break about the ways in which that has happened relatively seamlessly. And I know especially early in the season, that really seemed to matter even more.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the big story has been, Sandy Brondello sat down with Jonquel Jones and was like, JJ, I need you to aim for a double-double every night. And that is almost what has happened post All-Star break, very close to. But I think it's a little bit more complex than that. And I think when you talk about sacrifice, which this was a marker that Courtney Vandersloot and Breanna Stewart put down in February when they were introduced. They used that word sacrifice, I don't know, maybe 5 times. They used it so much, I think it made it into either the headline or the subheadline in my story about that press conference. Mm-hmm. And so the big question was, how was this going to manifest? And I don't think it's manifested in the way of how many shots people are taking. I think it's more manifesting when it comes to how the shots are being set up and who is involved and how they end up getting the best shot that they can. I mean, Sandy Brondello uses the term good to great. She talks about moving the ball to the second side, to the third side. Her vision for this team has always been about the ball movement and the player movement off the ball and being able to, I guess, out instinct their opponents in that they have so many players who can make really quick decisions. They're going to beat you because they're moving the ball quicker than the defense is even thinking about rotating and moving. And so I think that's where you see the sacrifice. You see it in the fact, and you know what? To be quite honest, Stewie was doing this in the first half of the season because she felt like she had to in order to help the team win. And what I mean by this is she would get trigger happy. I mean, she's Breanna Stewart. She can make shots from anywhere. But sometimes without thinking, she would just sort of be like, okay, I got to put a shot up because the movement off the ball on the second and third sides, it either wasn't there or she wasn't seeing it. And so what has happened is the Liberty's process in order to get to whoever has the best shot has improved. And you're seeing when Stewie has the ball, she is looking to get people involved instead of just getting into a two-player action with Courtney Vandersloot. That was something that we saw a lot. And Sandy Brondello said to me, she said, 2 players are not going to win us the WNBA championship. That just is not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to the sacrifice, what it means is making sure the other 4 or 3 players on the floor are involved in the action. It doesn't mean they're going to score, but it means, okay, moving the ball to Maureen Johannes and allowing her to, I guess, make defenses go a little bit nuts and are confused as to how she's going to move because she moves like water, right, and allowing her to make the right pass, if that's to Stewie or if that's to JJ. That's what they were struggling with in the first half.
You know, it's interesting, too. You talked about how 1 or 2 players aren't going to have them win a WNBA championship, as Sandy Brondello said. But I'll tell you this, here's what Sandy does know. Breanna Stewart has to be out there more than any other player. And if you look at the minutes played this season, the only 2 who are ahead of her are Alyssa Thomas, who, of course, we're going to be talking about tomorrow with Jacqueline LeBlanc. And Alyssa Thomas is very much a value to team argument when it comes to her MVP case. But Stewie ain't far behind. You know, there are Arike Ogunbowale is 1,375 minutes played. Alyssa Thomas is at 1,362. Stewie's 3rd. You know, only Kelsey Mitchell and Jewel Lloyd right behind her, and Chelsea Gray right there as well. But you are talking about a player who, for all the Liberty's depth, and certainly the reason why the Liberty may well be entering this playoff race as the favorite, despite being potentially the number 2 seed when you look at the way they have played of late. I think it's really significant that you see her out there. But I want to talk about another thing before we get into a little bit more of the reporting, which is that, to my mind, this week, Breanna Stewart made the case in 3 divergent but convincing ways. And so I want to break that down briefly if I can. On Monday night, I believe that she managed to lead her team to victory against the Las Vegas Aces, against Asia Wilson, who is right there in that conversation for me as well. And obviously we'll talk about Asia primarily on Thursday. But for Stewie to figure out the way to win, for the Liberty to figure out the ways to win, and she's done that pretty consistently here throughout August, and in a way that has led us to change the way I think we need to think about the pecking order. Less Aces and then everyone else, with the Liberty leading the pack of everyone else, and much more like, I think we talked about this before, it's not going to surprise me if the Aces win the championship, but it's not going to surprise me either if the New York Liberty win the championship at this point. So, you know, Breanna Stewart is a primary reason for that, to put it mildly. And then, while I am hesitant to say, geez, look at Friday night as a barometer, because it's back-to-back nights for the Sun. I try not to judge. I think we talked about this on the way, the pressure Friday night. I don't tend to judge teams based on how they do on back-to-back nights. So it wasn't as if the Sun losing 89-58 on Friday night made me think, gee, I now know about Alyssa Thomas and the Sun. It did very much feel to me like the Liberty had an opportunity to go out and crush a very good team who might have been tired, and they found the way to do it. They leveraged it, and they dominated that game. But the biggest one for me, and this takes me back to remembering Breanna Stewart in 2018, which is to say, there was a game, I have to go back and look exactly what it was, but it was at Madison Square Garden. It was in the middle of the season, and the Liberty were playing against the Storm. And just, there was this moment in the fourth quarter where Breanna Stewart saw the game was there for the taking. And again, I know this is a violent image, but like, she steps on people's necks. She just like comes in and she crushes them. And that's what happened on Sunday in Chicago. It's 61-60. The Sky are winning. The crowd is behind them. They're playing for their playoff lives. Sky have a lot of talent. And they just went out on a 22-0 run. I mean, that's championship stuff. That's what you do. And there's just something about a team with Breanna Stewart on it. And I've seen it dating back to her UConn years, where there is just to use the Gino Auriemma phrase, the when to rather than the how to. Breanna Stewart knows the when to as much as anyone I've seen in this league. And so it's remarkable. So I want to get into the reporting a little bit in segment 3. Just first, back with Jackie Powell here, and the reporting, there are people who have seen Breanna Stewart, like I was talking about before, dating back to her UConn years. And one of them, of course, being Steph Dolson, her teammate this year. Jackie, I know you had the chance to talk to Steph for your upcoming piece. Take me through what Steph's MVP case is for Stewart.
Yeah, so I spoke to Steph this past weekend. She was very generous with her time, and I really appreciated it.
Yeah.
And what was the most fascinating about what she had to say was how she defined MVP.
Mm-hmm.
And this actually is going to dovetail with what you were saying about Stewie's minutes, because I don't think Stewie's minutes is in direct correlation to her scoring, if that makes sense. There is another reason why Sandy Brondello has Stewie out there for as many minutes as she does. And I think the same thing applies to Alyssa Thomas, obviously, maybe a little bit less to Asia Wilson, but that is a whole other discussion. But going back to the definitions here, I went on dictionary.com. I went on Merriam-Webster. I asked Sandy Brondello what her definition of MVP was.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those definitions were not what Stephanie Dolson had to say and what her definition was. And so I am going to read it aloud. It's a very quick definition here.
Sure.
She said, an MVP is someone who makes the game easier for the people and players around her. That is a definition that sounds so simple, yet it was one that I did not hear at all during this reporting process before she and I spoke.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you think about Breanna Stewart and how she helps everyone else out, that is how, and that is why Sandy Brondello has her on the floor as much as she does.
Yeah.
It's not just about the scoring. It's about, okay, Stewie can initiate the offense when Courtney Vandersloot needs to take a break.
Mm-hmm.
We saw that happen against Chicago. I mean, Jocelyn Willoughby was sort of playing the one, but sort of Breanna Stewart was playing the one as well. Also, so that's an example of Stewie making things easier for the other players on the floor. Then you look defensively. So it was really interesting because there was a lot of discussion about transition defense. And obviously there was a talk about the Dallas Wings and their struggles on transition defense. And Steph sort of said something really interesting about Stewie when it comes to that. Steph is sort of like, Stewie does not take any possessions off. She sets an example like that. She is, I mean, even when things are not going well for her on the offensive end, I know there's, I guess, people tend to, the word motor, it's sort of like, well, what does that mean? Maybe I'll change it to drive. Her drive and her will to just be like, okay, I'm going to put my head down and just put the effort in, even if it looks pretty or even if it doesn't. We saw that. We've seen that from her, against Chicago, especially. We saw that.
We saw that against Vegas last week. Again, think about it this way, right? If you shut down the offense of a star, you generally think, geez, you've managed to keep them from having the same kind of impact. She missed all 7 of her 3-point attempts against Vegas on Monday night, August 28th. She shot 9 for 23 from the field. And yet she was 20 points, 12 rebounds, 7 assists, 3 steals, 2 blocks, 0 turnovers. You look at a game like that and you say, all right, the shooting efficiency wasn't there, but she played over 38 minutes. That's an MVP game against the biggest competitor for the WNBA title. It kept them in the race for the 1 seed. To me, that's an MVP performance, even though you're 0 for 7 from 3.
Exactly. And I think when you look at the two players that she is going up against in this race, and Asia Wilson and Alyssa Thomas, if you use the Steph Dolson theorem of who is the player that is helping out everyone on her team the most,
Mm-hmm.
I think with Asia, you could sort of see it on the defensive end. You see it, how she essentially is their back line, and she's sort of like this brick wall that if you go into the paint, it's like, oh boy, you're literally coming in contact with a 6'4" like cat that is just pouncing. But I think on the offensive end is sort of where you can make the case that Stewie helps everyone out a little bit more than Asia, in that a lot of Vegas's struggles come where, okay, let's just get it to Asia, and there isn't movement out of getting it to Asia. I'm not saying that Asia Wilson is a bad passer. I just think she could be a better one.
Well, and I will say, in fairness, and the Asia case is a combination. It's almost like a hybrid of the case for AT and the case for Stewie, in the sense that there is so much of that offense is reliant on her, and yet her true shooting percentage is actually the best of the three, which is fascinating to me. But absolutely, that's asking a lot of her. Is that necessarily best for the team? That's an open question. I mean, we'll find out in the next few weeks, frankly.
Yeah, and then in the comparison to AT, obviously AT and Stewie have a lot in common when it comes to how versatile they are and how much they're able to give to the team on both the offensive and the defensive end. But if you look at the Stephanie Dolson theorem, is AT really making it easier for her teammates? That I'm not sure about.
Well, she leads the lead in total assists. She is one up on Courtney Vandersloot. She's got 291. She has also 124 turnovers. Again, she has the ball in her hands a lot. Courtney Vandersloot 290, but she only has 98 turnovers. It's an incredible thing. It's an impressive thing. And for AT to bring that to a game that involves many other things is vital. But it is, to my mind, notable that Breanna Stewart only 143 assists. Again, it's apples to oranges because Stewie is on a team where she is not the primary distributor. In fact, she may not even be the secondary distributor most nights when you think about Vandersloot being on the court, or Sabrina Ionescu being on the court. But it is notable to me that Breanna Stewart has, and I talked about this up top in rate stats, but just total, she has 55 turnovers all year. Breanna Stewart, who is number one on every scouting report for the New York Liberty, has 55 turnovers in 37 games. And that, to me, you talk about making things easier for your teammates. Well, part of making things easier for your teammates is limiting turnovers, limiting the live ball needing to get back on transition defense. There's just a host of ways where Stewie's lack of mistakes matters a great deal for those around her as well, not just the plays she does make.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about AT, it's interesting, just because you were the league leader in assists does not mean that you are making things easier for everyone. Mm-hmm. She is finding people, sure. But I think I was listening to the Dunker Spot this morning, and they were talking about how with the Connecticut Sun, when their guards are making shots and when they're open enough to, they are a completely different team. And so I just wonder, when it comes to the Sun's spacing, and obviously, Alyssa Thomas is not a spacer. She has never been. I think about, well, how can she contribute to making sure that those guards are in the best position to make shots? I mean, I do not have all the answers, but I think it's a little bit more complicated than the simple drive and kick. And so
I just, to point out, I think there are two dynamics at play there, though, as well, in fairness to Alyssa Thomas. Sure. One being, you look at the sheer quantity of shooters around them, And DeWanna Bonner's had a solid year from three. Natisha Heidemann has gotten better. Tip Hayes is a good three-point shooter. Rebecca Allen as well. But it's not quite, I would say, at the level of a Vandersloot, a Sabrina Ionescu, who's having one of the great volume shooting years in the history of the league, maybe the best one ever, frankly, when you look at it in terms of number of threes she's taking and how many of them she's making. And so I think those do go both ways. But yeah, there's a real question of how you space when you're not taking those threes at all. Listen, I'd love to continue with this from here, but we are out of time. The great Jackie Powell, always great to have you on the show. So glad you were here to talk to us about the Breanna Stewart MVP case. To our listeners at home, thank you for making us your first listen every day. Come tomorrow. We'll be right back with you with the Alyssa Thomas MVP case from the great Jacqueline LeBlanc, who has covered the Connecticut Sun with distinction all year. MVP week finishes up on Thursday. Matthew Walter, our Las Vegas Aces reporter, talking all things Asia Wilson. And then you guys will decide. And my God, I'm going to have to decide at home too. I'm going to really enjoy thinking about it, but agonize over who I'm going to end up picking. So until then, I am Howard Megdal, wishing all of you a wonderful Tuesday.
Ogunbowale for the win.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.